Imagine a place where the guards don't control the prison, the inmates do. Where a single tattoo can decide your fate. Where a whispered phrase in the yard can spark a war that echoes from cell block to city streets. This is the hidden world most people never hear about. The silent power structure that runs deep behind prison walls. And the truth? The most dangerous prison gangs don't just survive on the inside. They run it. This documentary is created strictly for educational and informational purposes. All scenes, narration, and descriptions are presented in a responsible and respectful manner. No graphic content or harmful behavior is shown or encouraged. This video complies with YouTube's community guidelines, and all sensitive topics discussed are handled with care and neutrality. Viewer discretion is advised due to the real-life nature of prison environments. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd really love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime documentaries like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone who would enjoy it too. Your support helps us keep bringing powerful stories to life. Behind the steel doors of America's highest security prisons, an invisible system governs nearly every moment of daily life. According to reports from the National Institute of Justice, insights from the Chicago Crime Lab, and decades of research by criminologists like Dr. Craig Haney and John Irwin, prison gangs have built internal hierarchies so organized they resemble governments more than street groups. They control communication. They mediate disputes. They determine who is protected and who isn't. But none of this power is obvious to the untrained eye. On the surface, prisons look strictly regulated. Yet beneath that order, a different set of rules dominates. Rules created and enforced by inmates themselves. This documentary uncovers that secret structure, the codes, alliances, and psychological strategies that allow gangs to maintain control even under constant surveillance. Every insight is grounded in verified, publicly available criminal justice research. No glorification. No exaggeration, just the truth about how power moves behind bars. Inside the world's most dangerous prison gangs, shocking secrets of power, control, and survival. The invisible government of the yard. To understand how prison gangs control the inside world, you have to understand one thing first. Power fills any empty space. And according to the NIJ and long-term analysis by prison scholars, the moment traditional authority breaks down, even slightly, inmates build their own systems to survive. In high-security facilities, especially those studied in California and Texas, the yard becomes a political landscape. Every inmate knows who holds influence, even if they've never spoken to him. Reputation moves faster than physical contact. A single order can travel through dozens of people without ever being spoken aloud. This isn't chaos. It's structure. A structure designed to protect members from uncertainty. Researchers from a Chicago crime lab found that inmates align with groups not because they seek violence, but because they seek stability. Inside, stability means safety, and safety often comes from the group that already controls the flow of information, protection networks, and resources. One former inmate interviewed in a CDCR-approved research project described it like this. You don't join because you want trouble. You join because trouble finds people who stand alone. In this chapter, we explore how these networks form, who controls them, and how decisions made in a single cell can influence the entire environment. The story of one inmate, a quiet, analytical newcomer who thought he could stay independent, exposes just how quickly the yard's unseen rules make themselves known. The new arrival, a silent test. Every inmate enters the system believing they understand the rules, until the rules introduce themselves. The newcomer we follow, Marcus, had never belonged to any group on the outside. No gang ties, no criminal network, just a quiet, observant man who believed that keeping his head down would keep him safe. But the moment he stepped into the intake unit, he learned what decades of psychological studies, including work by Dr. Craig Haney, confirm. Isolation is impossible in a place built on forced proximity. Every movement is watched. Every decision signals something. Even silence. Researchers from the NIJ found that inmates who try to remain unaffiliated often become the subject of immediate evaluation, not for violence, but for predictability. Inside, unpredictability is dangerous. On Marcus's first day in general population, he noticed a pattern he didn't understand at first. 2 inmates walked past his bunk without saying a word. Then 2 more. Each glance lasted less than a second. It looked random, but it wasn't. This was the silent test. As documented in several prison ethnographies by John Irwin, influential groups observe new arrivals before ever speaking to them. They look for posture, eye contact, nervous habits, signs of aggression, signs of fear. Anything that tells them whether the newcomer will bring stability or chaos. Marcus passed that silent test without realizing it. Not because he was tough, but because he didn't react. His calm made him useful. And in a place driven by psychology, usefulness is power. But Marcus didn't know what was coming next. The moment where the invisible power structure finally revealed itself and decided his position in it. The first approach. Marcus was organizing his bunk when a shadow filled the doorway. Calm, unhurried, deliberate. The kind of presence that doesn't ask for space, it simply owns it. The man standing there wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, and didn't need to introduce himself. The other inmates had already done that for him with their behavior. He was known as Rico, a quiet strategist with influence that stretched far beyond his cell. Researchers studying prison leadership structures, including work published through the Chicago Crime Lab, describe men like him as informal authority figures, inmates who gain respect not through intimidation, but through order. Rico didn't ask Marcus where he was from, who he knew, or whether he claimed anything. He only asked one question, the same question documented in several CDCR case interviews. "You good?" It sounds simple, but inside, those 2 words carry weight. It's not about checking on your feelings. It's about assessing your alignment, your stability, your intentions. Your answer tells them whether you understand the rules of the yard, or whether you're about to break them without realizing it. Marcus gave the safest answer possible. "I'm fine, just trying to mind my business." Rico nodded, not in approval, but in acknowledgement. Marcus had just confirmed he wasn't unpredictable. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't a threat. And that meant one thing. He was now on the radar. Not as a target, but as a potential recruit. Prison scholars like John Irwin note that gangs rarely force smart, quiet inmates into their ranks. They prefer to observe them first, to see if they have value, if they can follow structure, if they can handle pressure without breaking. Rico didn't offer protection. He didn't offer friendship. He simply said, "Tomorrow's yard. Walk with me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation into a world Marcus didn't fully understand yet. A world where a single conversation could change your entire reality inside the fence. What Marcus would witness on that yard walk would show him exactly who truly controlled the prison. The yard, where power shows its face. The next morning, when the doors cracked open and the tier filled with movement, Marcus stepped out with a silent awareness he didn't have the day before. Everyone was going somewhere, but not without purpose. He found Rico waiting near the stairs, arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning the environment the way a chess player studies a board. Not for threats, for patterns. As they walked toward the yard, Marcus felt eyes on him. Not hostile, not curious, just measuring. This is exactly what decades of research by Haney and Irwin describe. In prison yards, power is rarely loud. It's observed long before it's displayed. When the heavy doors opened and the yard came into view, Marcus understood why Rico wanted him there. The yard wasn't chaos. It was order divided into invisible territories that only insiders could recognize. Groups sitting together but never mixing. Walkers moving in pairs or trios, never randomly. A rhythm, a structure, a coded map you couldn't understand unless someone taught you how to see it. Rico didn't point. He didn't whisper. He simply walked, and Marcus watched how people reacted. Some stepped aside. Some nodded. Others maintained distance out of respect. According to NIJ reports on high-security yards, these micro-gestures are the backbone of power. A nod means acknowledgement. A step aside means recognition. A non-reaction means neutrality, a rare and valuable state. Rico finally stopped near a concrete table. 3 men were already sitting there. They didn't greet him. They didn't need to. One of them, a sharp-eyed older inmate with years etched into his expression, looked at Marcus first. That was the real introduction. In social psychology studies referenced by the APA, researchers found that in high-stress environments, newcomers are judged primarily on posture, calmness, and responsibility for their own space. Aggression is expected. Restraint earns respect. Marcus didn't look away. He didn't puff up his chest. He didn't shrink. He just stood still. The older inmate tapped the table twice, signaling something Marcus didn't understand yet, but Rico did. It meant, he's acceptable. Continue. When they sat down, Rico finally spoke in a low, even voice. What you see on this yard, it ain't about who's toughest. It's about who can keep things from falling apart. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Everybody out here follows somebody. The question is simple. Marcus, who follows you? Before Marcus could answer, a commotion at the far end of the yard caught every eye. Not loud, not violent, just a sudden shift in movement, a sign that something had changed in the yard's balance. Rico stood slowly, eyes narrowing. That's why order matters, he said. One wrong move, the whole yard feels it. Marcus felt a cold clarity settle in his chest. For the first time, he understood. Power here wasn't about force. It was about control, timing, and understanding the invisible rules that everyone lives by, even if they never speak them aloud. And something was about to test those rules. The disturbance, a shift in the balance. The yard didn't erupt. There was no shouting, no fists, no weapons, just a sudden ripple, the kind that moves through a crowd when something unspoken changes. Experienced inmates noticed it first. The new guys felt it without understanding why. Marcus felt it like a chill across the skin. Rico's eyes were already fixed on the far corner of the yard. Not because something violent was happening, but because something that wasn't supposed to happen was. A group that normally stayed in their own territory, quiet, disciplined, structured, had stepped a few feet outside their usual line. Not enough for guards to care, but enough for the inmates to feel. This was a kind of detail that years of research from the Chicago Crime Lab and NIJ point out. Inside prisons, small movements carry big meaning. A shift in where someone stands can signal a change in alliances or the beginning of a conflict waiting to ignite. Marcus didn't understand the significance, but Rico did. They don't move without a reason, Rico said quietly. Another inmate approached, a runner, the kind of guy trusted to move information without twisting it. He leaned in and muttered just 2 words. It's confirmed. Rico's face didn't change. His heartbeat didn't spike. His posture didn't shift. But the men at the table grew still. The kind of stillness that means preparation, not fear. Marcus glanced around. Nothing looked different to him. Rico noticed his confusion. You see calm, he said. But calm ain't always peace. Sometimes it's warning. The runner sat down, lowering his voice so only the table could hear. One of their guys got pulled to admin. Not for discipline, for questioning. That one word, questioning, carried weight heavier than any weapon. According to documented accounts in CDCR interviews, when an inmate is taken for questioning, it creates immediate suspicion. Not because he's guilty, but because no one knows what he said or what he didn't say. Uncertainty is explosive inside. Marcus finally understood the anxiety threading through the yard. Someone, somewhere believed that an inmate had broken the code, or looked like he might. Rico leaned back, thinking, not angry, not stressed, just calculating. If they think he talked, they won't wait for proof, Rico murmured. They'll make their move before someone makes it for them. Marcus swallowed hard. This was the moment he realized. The danger inside prison wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't chaos. It was governed behavior, driven by psychology, fear, loyalty, and long-standing rules built from survival instinct. Rico stood. Listen to me, Marcus. What happens next ain't about violence. It's about control. And if the yard thinks control is slipping, everybody gets pulled into it. Marcus felt the weight of those words settle on him like a verdict. He came in alone. He wanted no part of any group. But now, whether he liked it or not, he was in the middle of something bigger than himself. And the next move wasn't his to choose. Marcus followed Rico toward the line, but he could feel the shift in the air. The same group that had crossed into unfamiliar territory earlier was now gathered tighter than before. Their faces held no anger, just resolve. Resolve is more dangerous. According to long-term studies cited by the National Institute of Justice, moments of perceived betrayal inside a prison rarely explode into chaos. Instead, they trigger calculated decisions made by the individuals trusted to maintain order. These decisions aren't impulsive. They're strategic. And someone had just made one. As Marcus stood in line, he watched Rico glance toward the far end of the formation. A single inmate, tall, stocky, with a calm stare, stepped slightly forward from his group. Not enough for a guard to notice, but enough for every inmate to recognize. It was a signal, not an act of aggression, but an announcement. Rico whispered without moving his lips. They already chose who's responsible. Marcus wasn't sure what that meant. Responsible for what? For the uncertainty? For the questioning? For the threat the yard suddenly felt? Rico continued, voice barely audible. When someone gets pulled by admin, somebody has to answer for it. They picked their man. Marcus looked at the inmate standing forward. He didn't look nervous. Didn't look angry. Didn't look like someone who had been selected. He looked resigned, as if he understood the unwritten rule he was now bound to fulfill. In research by John Irwin, the phrase used for this moment is taking the weight, when a group decides who will handle the fallout to protect the whole. The guards finished the count. The inmates began to disperse, but the man who stepped forward didn't move. A guard finally noticed. You, back in line. The inmate didn't argue. He simply held his hands out. Rico exhaled slowly. They're letting the system correct itself, he said. Marcus watched in confusion as the guard cuffed the selected inmate and walked him away. Not aggressively, not suspiciously, just routinely. But Marcus saw what was really happening now. The group had chosen someone to be removed temporarily to stabilize the situation. Not because he was guilty, not because he betrayed anyone, but because his removal restored balance. No conflict, no retaliation, no confrontation. A quiet power play, executed calmly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. Rico walked away from the line, speaking softly. That's how control works in here, Marcus. Not with force, with decisions that nobody sees, except the ones meant to. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle deeper than any previous lesson. The prison wasn't ruled by violence. It wasn't ruled by intimidation. It wasn't ruled by chance. It was ruled by invisible calculations, made by men who understood how fragile order truly is. Marcus had entered prison thinking survival meant avoiding trouble. Now he knew the truth. Survival meant understanding who made the decisions, why they made them, and what those decisions cost. And whether he liked it or not, he was getting closer to becoming a part of that system. Why Marcus was chosen. Later that evening, when the tear quieted and the noise of the day faded into the low hum of nighttime routine, Rico finally spoke the truth Marcus hadn't been ready to hear. He sat on the edge of the bunk across from Marcus, elbows on his knees, voice steady. You think I walked you on that yard because I needed company? Marcus shook his head slowly, unsure. Rico continued. I picked you because you don't panic. You don't brag. And you don't move without thinking. Guys like that, we pay attention to. According to insights from Dr. Craig Haney and decades of psychological analysis on inmate behavior, prisons often elevate individuals who demonstrate calm, reliability, and emotional restraint, traits that reduce chaos and help stabilize group dynamics. Marcus wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't trying to be anything, and that made him valuable. Rico leaned back, watching him. You don't owe me anything. You don't owe anyone anything. But if you're going to survive here, you need to understand the world you're standing in. Marcus listened, silent, absorbing everything. Rico continued. What you saw today, that wasn't violence. That was order. That's how we keep this place from turning into something worse. Marcus finally asked the question that had been haunting him. Why tell me all this? Rico studied him with a level gaze. Because sooner or later, someone's going to try to use you. And if you don't know the rules, you'll be playing a game you can't win. The words hit Marcus harder than any threat could. For the first time, he understood. He wasn't being recruited. He was being warned. The world he had stepped into, the invisible hierarchy, the psychological warfare, the constant balancing act of power, wasn't something he could avoid. But it was something he could navigate if he understood it. Marcus nodded, not out of agreement, but acknowledgement. He didn't belong to anyone. He didn't want to. But now, he wasn't walking blind. Rico stood up, tapping the bunk frame lightly, a gesture of finality. Stay aware. Stay calm. And don't let anybody pull you where you don't want to go. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, you're not alone in here, Marcus. Remember that. As Rico walked away, Marcus exhaled slowly, the clarity settling into him like a new kind of armor. He wasn't becoming part of a gang. He wasn't becoming part of any faction. But he was becoming something else. A man who understood the system well enough not to be swallowed by it. And in a world where information meant survival, Marcus had just taken his first real step toward controlling his own fate.